Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I have yet another card video for you guys. I am definitely on a roll. This one is inspired by this Starbucks coffee cup wrap that I got whenever the last time I was at Starbucks, so a week or two ago, I'm not even sure. But I was looking at it and it just totally struck me. The pattern on it and just the colors, the craft, all that kind of thing. And I just had to make a card basically inspired by this coffee wrap. So I've got a whole mess going on my desk here with dies and cardstock and all kinds of stuff just piled up. Um, yeah, that's usually how I end up working when I'm not filming, that sort of thing. So I did a bit of die cutting with some field day cardstock from MFT. To me, that is like Starbucks green. That's what it should have been named, but I guess there'd be copyright infringements on that. So anyway, field day cardstock. I die cut it with the largest die from the Blueprints 2 Dynamics, and then I die cut the radial stitch circle from within that because you wouldn't see that when you layer up the cardstock. And then I die cut the craft cardstock with the largest die from the Blueprints 1 Dynamics, which if you've been watching my videos for a while, you see me use those dies on pretty much every single card because they're just the perfect layering components. So once I was done die cutting, I wanted to stamp the die cut circle with the sentiment, and this is from the hand lettered holiday set. So I'm going to coat the die cut with my anti-static powder tool. This is an absolute must-have item. If you do not own this tool, I highly recommend it. I got mine years ago now, and it's going to last me forever. I don't even know if or when I would ever need to refill it. I used to use a little anti-static, the little bag, which again I've had for years, but I don't. The one thing I don't like with that is it just gets everywhere, gets all over your fingers, that sort of thing. Whereas this tool, I just is awesome. So I always do that because it keeps the embossing powder from sticking to the areas where you touch with your fingers or anything other than the spot where you actually stamped. So I inked up the stamp with the pigment ink and then used gold embossing powder over a coffee filter, which is always my go-to with embossing, so I can filter or like funnel it back into the container. Then I'm going to melt the embossing powder with my heat tool, which always is the best part, watching it melt. It's just fun, especially with the metallic powders, because they get all shiny and metallic, and it's just fun. So once I was sure I had it all melted, I'm going to kind of put everything back together again so I can get onto this craft piece of cardstock. Once everything's cooled off, which only takes a few seconds, I just use my fingers or I'll use a Swiffer cloth, just depending on what's handy, which I didn't have a Swiffer cloth handy, so I just use my fingers to rub off that anti-static powder so that it doesn't leave that white coating on the die cut there. So I'm using the die cut to kind of give me an idea of how I'm going to place these splatter images. And this stamp is from the Distress Pattern stamp set from MFT. And I'm just going to ink it up with the white pigment ink and then stamp it all around this craft cardstock. And you can see how it's totally inspired by this wrap. That is what jumped out to me when I was looking at it. So I went around once with the stamp, and then I wanted to intensify it quite a bit, similar to the wrap there, how there was just, you can tell there's like layers of snow. So I went over it back and forth a few times until I was happy with how many splatters basically I had going on here. So once I was done with that and happy with how many I had stamped, I'd gone through my ribbon stash. I haven't used ribbon on cards in so long, it seems, but I thought some red ribbon would look really cute on this card. So I have this old red gingham ribbon from my stash. So I pulled that out. And then I also wanted to add some more gold elements. So I had some glitter gold cardstock still sitting here from the previous card I made. So put that to good use. And I just trimmed off 2 thin little strips of it. And I'm just going to glue those to this card panel with my Tombow Monomalti. So get them glued into place first using a really thin amount. You don't want too much because otherwise it's going to ooze out and just create a huge mess. So thin strip of glue down the center of these little strips, get them into place, and that's where I use my grid mat to keep everything kind of lined up and to make sure I've got these strips straight across the card and not all wonky and on an angle. And then I just flip it over and trim off the pieces that are hanging over each end with my scissors, using the little panel there as my guide for where to cut. So super simple. And then for the ribbon, I just cut a length just slightly longer than this little card front here. Just cut that off. And I'm going to wrap that around my card front and then tape that down with some Scotch tape. Easiest way to add ribbon to your cards, in my opinion anyway, especially if you have trouble with bows and that, by tying down the first piece. It's just one less thing to worry about. So this is now in place with the tape. And then I want to get the sentiment adhered before I add the bow, because I wasn't sure if I was going to add the bow at the top or the bottom. I was basically flying by the seat of my pants as usual and filming at the same time. So I grabbed some foam tape to pop the sentiment up on the card and then get that into place. And then I just do the exact same thing. I'm going to flip this over and trim off the piece that's hanging off the edge with my scissors. So get that in adhered, flip her over, and then using the edge of the craft cardstock there, I kind of hold the scissors like right against that, so I'm not cutting into it, but then I'm cutting right against it, so it's perfectly straight. And then I just cut another piece of the ribbon, and I'm going to tie this, I decided at the bottom, right below the sentiment there. So yeah, when you do it as a separate piece like this, I've had a lot of people asking lately again about tying bows. Doing it as a separate piece, I don't need to use my reverse tweezers because I can just tie the knot normally. So that's already held into place, and then I can kind of fiddle and get my bow where I want it. I do have a video on my channel from years and years ago, on tying knots and ribbon bows. And my biggest tip for you guys is just practice. I've tied hundreds and hundreds of bows on so many cards over the years, like 12 years of tying bows. It just doesn't really phase me anymore. But yeah, I know in the beginning I used to struggle with it all the time and it used to drive me nuts. So practice, practice, practice. Like everything, it's just practice. So once I was done that, I realized I didn't really like the green border, so instead I die cut some red hot cardstock with the same Blueprints 2 Dynamics. And this time, since I wasn't going to take a die cut out of it, I just used my paper trimmer, like I showed in my previous video, to trim out the center of this piece. It's just a good way to kind of get some extra mileage out of your cardstock, because you don't see any of this, the center of this once it's layered together. And if you don't have a lot of cardstock, or, cardstock prices are starting to go up a bit with just shipping and all those sorts of things. So I'm really starting to be a lot more aware of that, and like, why waste, the good stuff when no one's going to see it. So trim that out so I can use that for, another project. I just put it in my little file folder with all my scraps, so I can use that next time on something else. And then I'm going to just add my ATG adhesive to the edges of this so I can adhere it to the red layer. So really simple, really easy. And I did, while I was doing this, I was mentally thinking again. I was like, am I going to pop this up on foam tape on my card? What am I going to do? But I was like, no, you know what? I think I'm just going to keep it simple and adhere it flat again. Kind of thinking along the mentalities of the less bulk, the easier it is to mail right now, especially if you're mailing like a lot of Christmas cards, that sort of thing. And then as a final little embellishment, I pulled out some enamel dots and decided to go with the gold glitter ones. These are by Doodlebug. I was going to use the red, but I thought the gold ones they're just fun. They just have that nice glitter look to them. I love these so much, and I have multiple packs of them, so I don't have a problem using a few extra on a card, because yeah, the more the better. So adhered a few of those, and now I'm going to get my card base ready. Heavyweight white cardstock, standard A2 size, so it's 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and then I scored at 5 1/2 with my Teflon Bolden folder. And then I always use the flat side to press in that crease, and it just creates the crispest fold. I know you guys are probably sick of me raving about this bone folder, but seriously, it changes your paper crafting life when you get it. So got that, and then yeah, I thought about putting the card front up on foam tape, but I decided, like I said, I'm going to adhere it flat to the card and keep her a little bit more simple this time. So got that going, got this adhered. For whatever reason, I always find it's easier when I'm adhering to the card base to do everything sideways. I'm able to see it better and get things lined up a little bit better. I'm usually looking more at the border. I get asked that a lot about layers and things like that. 1, die cutting gives you perfect layers. And then 2, I look at the bottom edge of the card itself and just try and eyeball like a even white layer all around it as I'm centering it on the card front, if that makes sense. So did that, and then I grabbed another sentiment from the hand lettered set and lined it up on my grid mat there so I could pick it up straight on the block. That's another thing I do to line things up and get them stamped straight. So do that, and then I inked it up with the same color of green ink, so the Field Day green ink, and then made sure my card base there was straight on the grid line, and then I kind of line up the grid lines of the block with the grid lines on my mat, and I get a perfectly stamped sentiment. And then as a final little embellishment, there's these little stars in that set. So I grabbed those, and I'm going to ink them up with my Delicata Golden Glitz gold ink pad, and just stamped little clusters of these stars around the sentiment on the inside of the card, just to kind of finish it off, and kind of also a little ode to, you know, if you're familiar with the Starbucks app and their little rewards that you get little gold stars. So that was kind of a hint to that. And yeah, that's all there was to it. So as always, there will be links below the video in the description box to the supplies used, as well as a link to my blog post. All that sort of info is below the video, whether you're on YouTube or on my blog. Thank you guys so much for watching, thumbs upping and subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.